Happy to be joined with Jeffrey Merks from Aird and Berlis, a legal law firm in downtown Toronto, Canada that focuses on new emerging industries, including psychedelics. How are you, sir?
Doing well, thank you. How you doing, Chad?
Good. Happy New Year. How's your downtown at Brookfield place? We were just talking about it off camera, but how's life in downtown Toronto? I know there's been obviously a lot of change with other people I've spoken to, but what are you seeing?
Yeah. Probably the similar experience to others coming downtown on a regular basis. It's really quiet. It's not many people in the parking lot. Things are shut.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, lawyers are essential services. So
of course they are,
people
right?
coming in.
We got to have them around.
Sense of self-importance, all that good stuff. We're the guys that write the laws, so we get to write the laws the way we like to see them, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So it is really quiet downtown. People have adapted pretty well from working from home, like all the various sort of all the areas of law where our firm works. People sort of at all firms and all lawyers really in the province have done a good job adapting quickly to quickly changing environments.
So I wanted to have you on. Obviously, people in the cannabis and psychedelic space, Aird Berlis, as far as a legal firm, needs no introduction at all. But for my viewers across Canada and across the U.S., maybe talk a lot about your expertise level, that the firm, obviously, the work that you, the clients that you work with. But the whole reason why we wanted to have you on here today is because we get a lot of people asking us questions about legal issues when it comes to psychedelics and how the whole business model works. So maybe talk a little bit about Aird Berlis and some of the clients that you work with in the space.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks a lot, Chad. And we've worked really hard, long and hard, on the reputation as a firm that we've developed in both the cannabis and psychedelic space, as well as other spaces where we work, but those two in particular, and both spaces where I'm really actively involved. So a little bit about the firm. For those who don't know us, approximately 200 lawyers focused on mainly mid-market work. So it touches on a lot of the aspects that a lot of these businesses really need in both cannabis and psychedelics. So it's really a business law firm, very focused on the mid-market and really helping our clients with kind of all the aspects of their business that they need. So I'm myself, I'm a corporate lawyer focusing on M&A and capital raising work. But other people in our firm are working on things that are really critical to cannabis and psychedelics issuers, like intellectual property in particular. But then there are more mundane sort of things where they need assistance as well. So like employment matters, real estate matters, banking matters for our cannabis clients who can get it. So we try to look after our clients really from inception to hopefully success, whether that is a public exit and continue working with them as a public company, an M&A event, or sadly for some, a distress scenario where they maybe have to go through some sort of insolvency process and really maybe start things over again.
Yeah, well said. I want to start and begin with the psychedelic industry. It's a industry that has seen a huge amount of growth, especially over the past, I would say, 4 to 5 months when Compass Pathways went public on the NASDAQ back in September, and we've seen a huge emergence in the industry. And with that, we have a lot of investors that are very interested in the space. And a lot of questions are emailed to us all the time, and they ask, like, how does this business model work? How do these companies, like, where do they grow mushrooms? Where is it imported from? So I guess my first question is like, maybe talk a little bit about, if you're a Canadian company and you're looking to obviously generate revenue, what are some of the legality issues that they obviously have to deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure, of course. And I think when we see some very early stage clients coming to us looking for advice and guidance, these are the kind of questions they really start with. Like, so here's what I'm doing. Can I do it? Can I not do it? So maybe what I'll do in terms of breaking things down and answering the questions, particularly starting with revenue, is I think from a legal aspect, and I've seen some banks really use this kind of like this setup as well. So thinking about the psychedelics industry in really 4 distinct buckets. So one would be like a clinical kind of model.
Yep.
One would be like a pharmaceutical kind of model. One would be like really kind of a biopharma kind of model. Yep. And one would be a like a recreational or tourism kind of model. And maybe sort of each one of those various verticals has its own kind of regulations, and so we'll focus on maybe revenue generating number one, and so
the biotech and pharma seems to be a big growing trend, I would think, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. You see like companies like MindMed as probably the most prominent, Compass Pathways as well, very prominent. Their model, I think in terms of revenue is really kind of like a biopharma model. So the same way you see like some medical device companies and other pharma company, like smaller startup pharma companies, really developing drugs, and that company, its drug is either going to make it or it's not. And if it makes it, it'll generate a large amount of revenue. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. So it's really that, it's pretty much that binary. I mean, there are other ways that those companies maybe look to generate revenue through, whether through a partnership with a big pharma company or something. But it's really that, like, drug development. It's drug development in the psychedelic sort of space. So that's how they might eventually generate revenue. I think some of the other verticals, and really the other three that I described, really have a quicker pathway to revenue. So the clinical model, you see it with companies like Champignon Brands, Field Trip. Numinous, I think, has part of their business really running ketamine right now because it's legal and they can do it in Canada and I think some states as well. Really operating those ketamine clinics and seeing patients and generating revenue that way. You see nutraceutical companies or companies with a nutraceutical even component to their business, selling things that are perhaps Health Canada regulated, but they're not drugs. So they're lion's mane mushrooms. There are other types of mushrooms that are
various adaptogens, right?
Exactly. And you need some approvals for those, but it's really more around labeling and branding rather than drug development. And then sort of jumping across to the to the sort of tourism business or the kind of recreational type business where that's legal. They're making sales, and the sort of tourism type companies are having people come to their retreats and their spas in places like Jamaica, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, one of the examples I wanted to use is like right before Christmas, Midicine, which is out of the US. They announced that they're going to be legally shipping magic mushrooms, their first import into Canada, to one of their facilities in Alberta. So, I have a good understanding, but legally, maybe tell my viewers how something like that works, and obviously the partnership that they would have with Health Canada.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So in terms of both import and export, I think it's important to recognize that both from your exporting jurisdiction, so where those products are coming from, Midicine in our example is going to need an export permit from wherever it's sending mushrooms. There are other companies around that are looking to export psilocybin-containing mushrooms from other jurisdictions, potentially to Canada. So again, you're going to need your export permit from whichever jurisdiction those substances are leaving, and in order to do that, they're going to have to be, grown legally. But it's really going to be governed by the regime where they're initially operating. Then the import permit into Canada is really going to be a permit from Health Canada, and Health Canada, it looks at things like really where the products are going, whether they can be used here, and so Midicine would have had to have connected itself. It would have had to get an import permit from Health Canada, but it would have also had to have been going to a specifically authorized kind of facility where they could be used, whether that's a university or a licensed dealer accepting that delivery. It's sort of generally how those sorts of permits are going to work.
What are some of the protocols that, an institution like Health Canada or the FDA would look for when, I guess, certifying a license to some of these companies?
Sure. So they're going to be very much focused on they're sort of two principal elements. One is going to be who are really the operators behind these licenses. So who are the sort of, and really that's sort of, it's really looking at things like criminal elements. They don't typically really focus on, it's going to be mainly focused on criminal type elements and not wanting to see those kind of elements make their way into this highly regulated kind of industry. And then they're also going to be looking at the facility and what it is they're going to be doing. So again, it's really that there's two aspects: one, sort of the human aspect, and two, really the operational kind of aspect.
As this industry evolves and you see more and more research being done, do you think with some of these partnerships that are being announced, this is one step in the right direction where we're paving our way towards federal legalization from a medicinal standpoint?
I do, yeah. I think there's a few different elements that are really kind of driving or going to result, which I think eventually will result in the legalization for medicinal purposes, as you mentioned, for psychedelic substances as a whole. I mean, there may be nuances for particular substances, but as a whole, I think seeing the Section 56 exemptions that are being granted by the Minister of Health, and really what I would describe as sort of the creeping scale of those. So originally, Therapsil and its incredible work with end of life patients was able to get those sort of initial Section 56 exemptions, but then seeing the acceptance by the Minister of Health of exemptions for non-end of life kind of treatments, I think shows a bit of a move along the, again, medicinal clinical kind of path, but really an acceptance of the potential benefit of these substances by the Minister of Health. So I think that's really one way in which sort of the industry is being developed from a legal perspective, how it's sort of working its way towards legalization. I think sorry, go ahead.
You were going to say, like you mentioned Exemption 56, and for those that aren't aware of like what Exemption 56 is, you obviously get this prescribed from your GP. So what is it exactly and how does it work? And obviously, how do you obtain one?
Yeah, sure. So what you would do, again, at sort of a general level, what you would do is you'd have to make an application to the Minister of Health in order to provide you with a specific exemption in a narrow set of circumstances for particular, there's really sort of three headings under which you could get a Section 56 exemption. The one that's been really relied upon heavily and it seems to be getting a lot of attention is really the public interest. But there's also the ability for Section 56 exemptions for research purposes or for religious purposes. So it hasn't gotten as much attention recently or by the industry as a whole. But there are exemptions again for other purposes. There's some for example, churches in Winnipeg have gotten some exemptions for ayahuasca. Again, narrow, not really sort of the focus of your investing group, but there is a bit broader range of exemptions as well.
Well, I just think that ultimately at the end of the day, in order for you to make a calculated investment decision, it's obviously a better idea to obviously outline what this all means, the industry and some of the legality loopholes that, these companies obviously have to go through and what's the timeline, involved in that. One other thing I wanted to ask, and it's a growing trend, obviously, I don't want to say trend, but you can't help it. Like, Vancouver potentially could be decriminalizing drugs within their city. You've seen it across the state of Oregon, Washington, D.C. California is now even considering it as well. So we've alluded about federal legalization with my prior question. It appears to me that this, do you feel like this is growing a lot more because of the current lifestyle conditions that we're currently in?
I think so. Seeing a lot of the particularly, and I'm somewhat persuaded by some of the people in the industry that are again focused on the medicinal elements of this and how they see great potential in treatment of depression, for example, is a great example that we see a few companies talking about. I think that
the work that's being done with U.S. soldiers and even Canadian soldiers as well and PTSD, it gets staggering when you're seeing some of the feedback that's developing and the research that's being provided and the results that are happening as well.
Yeah, I certainly think that the research is really going to is actually what's kind of underlying what seems to be a growing movement amongst people for sort of focused legalization of these substances again for treatment of various illnesses. So again, not a recreational focus, but a medicinal focus. And I think when people start to take those kind of actions and we start to see potentially more pressure put on federal government and federal ministers to really take some action, I think that is certainly one way legalization occurs. I mean, another way, and for those who are familiar with it, certainly medicinal cannabis was really accessed and really pressure was put on the federal government by the Supreme Court of Canada, insisting that a successful charter argument could be made in favor of medicinal cannabis. I think
that's an interesting one, and I'm sorry to cut you off there, but
no, that's okay.
What is the message, I guess, that's being communicated to these government officials? Because the more and more you read about it, both here in Canada and in the U.S., is that they're a lot more receptive to it. So for the average person that doesn't get a chance to speak to government officials on a day-to-day basis involving this industry, what is the information being communicated to them, and why are they starting to be more receptive based off of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see that. I'd like to think that our really elected officials are being persuaded by a lot of the research that's being done by great institutions, both in Canada and the United States, maybe principally by the United States. I would say probably educational institutions necessarily more than some of the companies that we're talking about that are listed. Though the companies are certainly participating in and producing great research as well. But my personal sense is that that government officials are really getting a hold of and being made aware of that academically produced research and to the benefits of these types of substances, and are listening and are hearing people and seeing kind of grassroots type of campaigns really pushing along and seeing again being brought to the minister's attention, and really the minister taking positive actions in order to make these medicines available to people in need.
Yeah, well said.
And in Canada, at least, I hope that part of what's driving that is knowing the backdrop and the history related to cannabis and its sort of medicinally supported use. I'm hopeful that the ministers are seeing that, knowing that, and in addition to seeing the research and thinking it's sort of the right thing to do, we do have that sort of legal backdrop if needed that could be brought and challenged.
Well, listen, I appreciate the time you sitting down with us today. I'd like to have more of these conversations just to learn more, especially as the industry obviously adapts. And let's face it, it's had tremendous growth over the last, like I said, 4 or 5 months. And 2021 seems to, or appears to be a big year, obviously, for this industry and how much growth is going to take place. So again, Happy New Year. Appreciate your time, and let's keep in touch.
I agree. Thank you very much, Chad. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Jeffrey.